hopefully joining Ghovat for the pivot during COVID event. Albert Einstein said, in the middle of every difficulty lies opportunity. And our amazing group of renowned panelists will discuss opportunities for businesses and individuals during COVID and provide unique insights. I'm Michael Metzger. I'm the Vice Chair of the German American Business Association in Southern California. And during the day, I'm a partner at Geycroft Partners, a global investment bank providing M&A and financing advisory to internet, media, and technology companies. Ghovat is a non-profit organization fostering information exchange and networking among the German American communities in California and Germany. We have a reach of over 10,000 companies and individuals, and our events are organized by industry group chairs in the field of venture capital and entrepreneurship, media and entertainment, workplace California, women in business, among several others. One additional exciting upcoming event I want to mention is on June 2nd, is health insurance during COVID-19. If you're interested in that, I encourage you to join that. And if you're interested in becoming actively involved in Ghovat or join us as a member, just please let us know. With that, I would like to introduce our co-host from NRW.Invest. Eva Plus is the head of the North American Business Unit. Eva, thank you for supporting our event.
Thank you very much, Michael, and thank you the whole Ghovat team for cooperation and offering this virtual panel today. A very warm welcome also from my side. I'm Eva Platz. I'm heading, as Michael said, the business unit North America at NRW.Invest. NRW.Invest supports foreign companies, US companies, that are interested in entering the German market on behalf of the Minister of Economics of the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia. And we help companies settle down and open up an entity, and what seems to be the most challenging task, get into the German networks. NRW, this is short for the complicated name North Rhine-Westphalia, is the biggest of all German states by inhabitants, with 18 million people, by GDP with 20% of the German GDP, and by inward investment. And 20 out of the 50 top-selling German companies are headquartered in our area, but there are also more than 700,000 small and medium-sized companies and hidden champions. So the Deutsche Telekom and DHL, Bayer, Henkel, RWE, E.ON, Miele, just a couple of names. So these are very challenging times for all of us personally, economically, and business-wise. And I sometimes wonder when we are going to evaluate this crisis after, let's say, 10 years, what are we going to say? And I'm sometimes frightened what are we going to answer when our children will ask us, why didn't you see it? Why didn't you see it coming? So there are a lot of decisions under uncertainty right now for all of us, for governments, for companies, and for individuals as well. And I do not believe that there's only one company that is not affected by this COVID-19 crisis today. In Germany, the government started a huge program supporting companies with subsidies and loans. And what seems to be work quite well is the Kurzarbeitergeld, we call it. It's a possibility not to lay off your employees, but to put them on part-time. And this is a huge, there's a benefit because companies do not lose their talent. And we all know that talent is key. And we hope this is going to be beneficial for the companies. I also see a huge potential with all of us in home office, remote work, and some of us experiences in homeschooling. There's a huge potential for tools and business solutions, good solutions, We have great companies here in Germany and in our area, but also the US companies are very welcome. And I see a huge potential for US companies in Germany as well. And whenever you're ready to enter the German market, please feel free to contact me. And I'll be very happy to help you settle down and find your way through the jungle and into the network. I'd like now to hand over to my colleague Kai, who's running our Californian office. We are very happy to have this great panel today, and thank you very much to our great panelists who are joining us today. Kai is heading our Californian office. He is also a professor for digital entrepreneurship at University of Digital Applied Science in Cologne. And he's a serial entrepreneur and an investor. And since last year, he's running our Californian office. So please feel free to contact Kai or me whenever you do have any questions. So now, Kai, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eva and Michael, for the warm welcome. And yeah, welcome everybody to this first truly transatlantic online event from both sides of the pond, organized by GABA and NRW.Invest. And I believe we have a great panel this morning or this evening, depending on where you're joining us from. So we have, and I believe everybody has joined. So let me just go through the list. We have Luis Pinto. He's the director, online learning platform Udemy. We have John Goldman, the board partner at venture capital firm Geycroft. We have Alexander Krappe, head of incubation at hubraum, Deutsche Telekom. We have Gunnar Trommer. He's the partner and MD at Boston Consulting Group, Digital Venture. And we have Ralf Duester, president and CEO of Setlog. So looking at your video streams, it looks like hairdressers have opened again in your parts of the world. So good news there already. Welcome everybody. And I'd like to kick it off with a quick 2 to 3 minute introductory round. So if you could just let us know who you are, what do you do, and most importantly, that's why we're here. How has actually COVID affected your business? Luis, maybe if you want to kick it off.
Thank you, Kai. It's a pleasure being here. And my name is Luis Pinto. I'm in San Francisco, working for Udemy, focused on relationships with governments and Europe, Middle East, and Africa. For more than 10 years, I've been in EdTech, helping governments in K-12, doing venture capital investment. And we were all surprised by this issue of COVID. And one of the big questions is, why didn't we prepare for this? And even if you are advising governments that have a responsibility on large scale systems, a lot of people were not ready, from the school systems, bringing students home, teachers, and then surging the online resources. So within Udemy, of course, we are in the middle of this transformation in a positive note. And I'm happy to share this along the next hour or so with all of you. But just to say that we are already working with some entities in Germany. Just to give you some context, of course, we have a worldwide operation, but with governments, it's still early stages for us. It's kind of a startup in a startup, and that's the work that we're developing. I'm happy to share more along the way. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Luis. Welcome. John Goldman.
I'll take it off mute there. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I'm a board partner at Geycroft, as well as the general partner of a seed fund focused on video gaming. I really spend most of my time with entertainment technology. So I'm on the board of Wondery, which is a podcast company. I'm involved in sort of sports related ventures. And Geycroft is sort of a multi-stage fund. We've got about $2 billion under management. We focus on everything from seed to growth. And, you know, for the entrepreneurs in the audience, we invest up to $1 million in seed, 2 to 7 in A's and B's, and 20 to 30 million in growth. And we've worked very closely with partner firm eVentures in Germany on growth investments. And as I said, I focus mostly on the video game industry, which, as people may have been reading, does very well in times of crisis. So the industry is booming right now. Lots of people at home are, playing games, and it does well during good times. It does really well during bad times. The last time the industry was booming so much was actually the financial crisis of 2008. So it's sort of a counterpoint to bad news, even though the news is very bad.
Thank you, John. Alexander Krappe.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. My name is Alexander Krappe. I work for hubraum, which is the incubator of Deutsche Telekom. On behalf of Deutsche Telekom, we invest as kind of the early stage seed arm into a younger stage startups up to 1 million euros as a co-investor. And second to that, we run innovation and incubation programs on behalf of Deutsche Telekom, where we expose telco infrastructure like 5G, edge computing, IoT, voice, and the likes to the startup and developer ecosystem. Yeah. I think how COVID has affected our business is not so much in the what we do, but much rather in the how we do stuff and how we work together, especially in a large corporate. Yet on let's say topic and strategy wise, we see obviously more focus on topics like communication, digitization of services, especially in the German Mittelstand. So the SMEs, which I think are not as advanced as everybody hoped for, and I think Deutsche Telekom will play a major role going forward to help them further digitize.
Yeah, a lot of interesting points that you touched on. I want to hone in on a few of those in a minute, but first, just to continue our round, Gunnar, if you want to do an introduction.
Sure, happy to, and thanks for having me. Gunnar Trommer, I'm a partner with BCG Digital Ventures in Manhattan Beach. Actually born and raised in Cologne, so something connecting, feels like coming home almost. So what, maybe just some background what Digital Ventures does. We started with about 50 people 6 years ago, which grew to now over 1,000 people worldwide to build new businesses for and with the companies that BCG would consult. And so that means that we have product managers, designers, engineers to actually stand up typically technology-enabled businesses. So digital data, AI type of businesses that help in the different industries where technology can really fuel the growth, or also to set up complete new codes where we also have the ability to co-invest. And so to your question, Kai, as you would imagine, many people cut back on their investment spending, so the adjacencies, the far out there type of plays that may be coming. I actually believe that some companies are getting armed to also invest at lower premiums, which we will be seeing right now. But this is still probably a few months out, would be my guess. What we're seeing right now is that we're helping companies together with our BCG colleagues to strategize around how can we stabilize the business and how can we start to have a competitive edge over what other companies in the same industry are doing, at least. Meaning, so I work mostly in healthcare. Many pharma companies have sales forces that are completely grounded. So we're helping them to have a much more digital approach to get through to their customer, their consumer, whether it's the patient or whether it's the physician, versus sales reps who cannot go to see the physicians anymore to sell the drugs. So that's an example of kind of digital innovation, which really is also productized, but closer to the core versus an adjacency. So that's a major shift that we're definitely seeing because of COVID-19 right now.
Also exciting. Thanks for sharing. And again, I'd love to, I'll have some follow-up questions for you in a minute there as well. But just to continue our round, so Ralf, if you want to do a quick introduction as well, please.
Ghovat team, Eva, Kai, thanks for having me. welcome everybody also from my side. I'm co-founder and member of the board of Setlog in Germany. As well, I'm president and CEO of Setlog Corp USA, based in Manhattan. Setlog produces software for supply chain management solutions, supplier relationship, and corporate social responsibility tools. Our customers are especially sourcing and producing companies from the fast-moving consumer goods sector, industries like textile and apparel, healthcare, electronic, toys, food, department stores, retailers, brands, and so on. So many of those companies who really suffer at the moment. And I'm as well at the steering committee of the Competence Net Logistics, led by the Department of Commerce and Digitalization of NRW in Germany. And what we see here at our company, for us it was pretty easy because we are a software company and everybody has the possibility to work remote, to work at home. We have home office for all our employees, for all our colleagues. So for us it was easy, but there was a huge challenge for some of our customers, and also for the companies we talked to. There was a disruption we could see very early after Chinese New Year, when the factories in China stayed closed, and the containers which arrived at the Chinese ports didn't come into the land because the truck drivers were missing. And so at that very early stage, we saw that there is a tsunami coming, and what had to be built up in the last couple of weeks was exactly the communication and building up remote work, not only internally for the companies, but also sharing data, information, and continue the communication with all partners along the supply chain, with the departments internally as well as cross-company communication. That was one of the greatest challenges which came up, and to go on with the business. And I think we will discuss this a little bit more in the next.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ralf. By the way, just a general shout out for the audience out there. If you have any questions for our panelists, by all means, feel free to send them in. You can just simply send us them through the chat box here, and we'll try to answer them in about 30 minutes, as many of them as possible. Yeah, a few of you already mentioned, that you haven't been to the office for a while, and remote work is obviously one of those concepts that has been getting a lot of boost now in the last few weeks. And I wanted to ask you, given that companies such as Twitter, for example, recently announced that, even after post-COVID, employees will be able to work from home. And just yesterday, I read a study on Business Insider that 2 out of 3 tech workers would leave San Francisco permanently if they could work remotely. So there seems to be a willingness there to continue to work from home. And then, on the other side, is it more productive? And, I'd like to get your thoughts on this, but just anecdotally, I was talking to my brother-in-law who works at a startup, and they have about 100 software developers. And he was telling me that since they had introduced home office, productivity has actually gone up. And interestingly enough, there has been a single sick leave for the last 8 weeks, and they never had that. So I wanted to ask you if you think this remote work or remote first world is here to stay. Do you think it is actually more productive or not? And just like to get your take on it. And maybe this time we'll go backwards. Ralf, if you want to start.
Well, Kai, I completely agree. One clear awareness of for the time after Corona will be the necessity of continuing the way of digitalization. You could see that at a further digitalization and also collaboration within the company and between the partners across companies. And I do not mean that emailing or Slack back and forth, but sharing all data, information, documents, building up central communication. I think that is one of the things which is in the planning to get an optimized process in future. And as I already mentioned, we are pretty aware of doing home office. Our software engineers, they like sitting at home. We have clear planning, 2 weeks sprint planning. And every day we have daily meetings, remote or personally. And that works absolutely. And when you see here in the Ruhr Valley, or also when you are in New York and you live in Jersey, you have 1 hour coming in, 1 hour going off, and you are tired when you arrive. And this time you really can work very productive. And I guess it will be a management decision for many companies to go on with this and to digitalize even more the partnership, communication, and data sharing, which is necessary in our globalized work.
Great. Okay. Gunnar, how about within Boston Consulting Group, or with, for your customers, what are you seeing there?
For us, it actually worked pretty well as well. What I would say is it really depends on what industry, what business you're in, whether kind of that shift to work from home makes sense and can be productive. And then we see that through the lens of kind of working with many different companies in many different industries. What we figured out for ourselves is that our productivity actually hasn't suffered all that much, not at all, really. I mean, we were still doing the work in some areas like engineering, also design. We see even kind of, well, stable, if not increased productivity, because those roles need more heads down time to really kind of focus on something versus be in too many meetings, which is good. For other areas, I find myself on too many Zoom calls, quite frankly. So there's something about efficiency in terms of now having to set everything up, and then you schedule something like a 20 or 30-minute meeting where otherwise maybe a 2-minute water cooler chat would have sufficed, right? So there's something about that social connectivity of the kind of organic interaction that doesn't happen like it does in an office environment. And then the last thing I'll say is there are areas of creative teamwork that are not quite as easy. So standing in front of a whiteboard and group thinking, of course, there are all the different digital tools, how you can do it, and then we make it work somehow. But there's something about the spark that you can completely replicate in a completely digital fashion. So my projection would be that we will likely see a new normal. So it won't be just the same. And I'm definitely not going to fly to China for a 3-hour meeting and instead do that remotely, right? So I think there's also an acceptance of different ways of working because every company globally has been impacted by this, and it's not just a regional or local phenomenon. But I do think that it will be somewhat of a hybrid for most companies, even still going forward.
Are you looking forward to this new normal, or?
I do actually. I tend to be a glass half full type of guy, so I try to find positive even in something that looks pretty dire. But I do believe that, for example, from a sustainability perspective, this will definitely be good, because right now BCG is one of the companies that is probably one of United's or Delta's best customers, right? So we will certainly not darken the skies as much, because our clients also have the willingness to work more remotely than they have in the past, and they have seen that it works because everyone was forced to. So those are positives that we definitely see and also want to capture.
Oh, great. Yeah, that's good news for sure. Alex, how about you at hubraum or Telekom? I mean, I know you guys obviously just went virtual with your current accelerator, right? With Quake, a program that you're running there on 5G, a 5G accelerator, which was supposed to happen in person. 10 startups from all over the world who are to come to Cologne, to Germany, and now you've basically switched to an entire virtual setup. So maybe, yeah, if you could just tell us about, this remote first world, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, sure. Let me, touch on that in a minute. First, one, let's say, data set that I found that before COVID, 30% of German employees actually wanted to work from home. No, after COVID or within, let's say, the COVID period, it's 83%. Of employees that are expressing the wish to work from home. So that seems that besides all the struggles that come with taking care of children, there is actually a strong demand, to continue working from home in the future. And second, I think also from a business perspective, looking at what DT achieved, they had to move 13,000 customer and technical support agents from an office location to a home office environment within a single weekend. Yeah, and that was achieved without raising the incident quota and still maintaining, let's say, the network quality that we saw in Germany. Yeah, so I think also from a business perspective, that actually seemed to work, and to your point, also raised efficiencies in those processes, and I think, it very much depends on the type of work that you are facing going forward. I think, rather transactional businesses, I think that's easy to do from home, yeah, virtually. When it comes to relationship building, creative sessions, or onboarding new employees, it's tougher, yeah, virtually, yeah, for obvious reasons. And let's say, to your point on our 5G accelerator, so we decided to partner with Quay Capital, that Kai is also very well familiar with, which is an American venture capitalist with very strong foundations in the US entertainment industry. And we partnered up with the goal of finding consumer-focused companies that translate their businesses into 5G cases, yeah, to put tangible 5G experiences into the hands of customers. And we planned that to happen in Cologne, as you said, because 5G also is an infrastructure play. You have that locally and not virtually. Yeah, startups from all over the world were supposed to come to Cologne in April, and for obvious reasons that wasn't possible anymore. So we had to kind of pivot from there and iterate and kind of now move this first kind of phase of the collaboration also to a virtual setup where kind of the relationship building, but also the creative sessions of defining what should be accomplished now in the phase, are happening the way we are interacting right now. But then we will have a second phase later on this year when travel becomes possible again, to bring people closer, let's say, to the local network that we have, yeah, and do the local onboarding and testing. Yeah. So I think it's good that we did it, yeah, for sure. It presents its own challenges for sure, but I think we are on the joint learning curve here, and yeah, looking forward to the results that we create out of that.
Exactly, yeah, exciting program for sure.
Yes.
Who else wants to comment? John, how about you? I mean, do you, for example, also the ventures that you work with, remote first world, remote hiring, and yeah, remote work, how's that working out for them?
Well, before I hit that, I think the one thing that we've noticed that's really interesting and unprecedented for us is that as a venture capital firm, we are now making investments without meeting the entrepreneur in person, without going to their office to do due diligence. Like, this has never happened in the history of our firm, and probably for a lot of firms. These are kind of major economic decisions on behalf of our limited partners, as well as for the entrepreneurs, and we're doing it over Zoom. So that's really unique. I think that probably can't last. We'll probably be more selective in what we do, but there's no substitute for going to somebody's company and walking around the office and seeing what everybody's doing and talking with more of the management team in person and spending personal time. For a lot of the companies that I invest in, to get to your particular question, it is very much creative work. There's no normative, good that, once we follow this recipe, we have fun. It's hard to make something that's fun and creative. And I think people really thrive off of, being in the same room and batting around ideas. I mean, there are plenty of video game companies that do have remote workforces and they manage remotely, but I don't think that's going to, I think it's going to be a hybrid approach, as I think many of the others suggested. I think a couple of the biggest changes that we'll notice just from operating businesses in general is one, you know, I certainly won't feel the need to hop on a plane to every conference every, you know, twice a month. Like there's a video game conference every month. And I'm sure that's the same for every other industry. And it's really sort of pointed out the huge amount of wastage in office space that, you know, so many people have their own dedicated office with all their books and other stuff. It's a massive use of space that is underutilized. So I don't know how that will affect. And, you know, for venture capital, one of the biggest uses of capital as a company grows is their real estate and rental expense. So it would be great to minimize that, although I don't know how that will affect the, you know, the commercial real estate industry. So a lot of, you know, a few potential positive outcomes, but for a lot of the work that I'm involved in, there's no substitute for FaceTime.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Maybe just as a follow-up question to your first point, I mean, the big question probably on a lot of startups and entrepreneurs' mind who are also on this call, has this crisis actually changed your investment approach? You just mentioned that you did make investments just through Zoom, basically, just connecting through people via Zoom. But has your overall investment portfolio gone down through the crisis? And then also, how about the due diligence process now, and have valuations come down? What has changed there on that end?
Yeah, so a few points on that. I think in some respects, it makes it harder for entrepreneurs in that it makes a warm introduction, you know, more critical. We're focused on people that we have some personal connection to because it's harder to diligence. So I actually skipped, you know, for many firms in the US, Monday and I guess this week because of the holiday, Tuesday is investment committee day. So I ducked out of investment committee for this because we've got two companies presenting. So the pace of, you know, if you've got a committed pool of capital, it's your obligation to deploy it. You can't just sit on it as a general statement. So we're doing investment committee, you know, every week, and we're deploying, but you really want to have some connection to the entrepreneur. So it does sort of limit, you know, the cold over the transom opportunities. And to your second question, yeah, in tough times, the valuations do get a little depressed. I'd say that's not the case in the video game industry, as I mentioned, because it's booming, but Geycroft invests in all sorts of industries, and it makes us focus much more on facts on the ground, like what sort of revenues is the company, you know, producing, what's the quality of their customer base. You know, you really sort of focus on fundamentals.
Mm. And in terms of investment level, I mean, could you say that X percentage, it has come down or not as much? I mean, it's just a more stringent due diligence process these days?
I mean, our pace of activity at our firm is not decreasing at all.
Okay. Okay. All right. Interesting. Luis, just wanted to get your take on this whole remote first world. How do you feel about it? And I guess Udemy must be benefiting from the overall situation, right? People staying at home and taking up e-learning and online.
Yeah, so it's really, for us, it's been really interesting. And of course, we have a surge in usage. We have today more than 50 million people taking courses on our platform, all around the world. And one of the things we saw in March and April was really a big surge in our volume on everything. So we have a marketplace, so we have people publishing courses. So we saw a big increase in people publishing new material, but we also saw the consumption changing some of the patterns. And one of the key things that we've been hearing from users is really career change. So people that lost their jobs and they're looking into new areas, and self-learning becomes the new way for them to be competitive and get back into the market. So I think as markets are shifting, people are also monitoring and seeing what kind of opportunities do they have going forward. As a company, we've been across a few milestones. One curious one Of course, like many other people say, productivity for us was really a good surprise effect being remote. We took everybody remote at the beginning of March before California issued the lockdown. Our team was all at home in all countries, but we hired 10% of our workforce online, remote. And we onboarded those people and they are successfully integrated into the team. So 10% is quite a lot. And it's something that was a new experience that we had to go through. So I think as an online learning company, we had our systems, people were ready. Of course, we have a lot of technical people. They could be more comfortable with this. But like someone was asking on the chat here, the productivity effect is probably making you available longer, more hours during the day because you're just available and you're not going anywhere. So you still require some discipline in making sure that you monitor what you do. Of course, if you talk to people in other regions, they may have a different cultural approach and you know, the right to be disconnected, what's going to be the future of this. But also people's lives, you know, people considering moving to other cities, working remote from anywhere. This myth about productivity going away, companies will provide incentives. So I think we're going to have a new normal that will be probably a mix. But this is here to stay from our point of view. And even for me, working personally with the governments, you can imagine that high-level officials, they are available if you travel and visit them at their office. And sometimes they make you wait a little bit. So if you think about people now being willing to be on a Zoom call, it will also relax the nature of the meetings that you will have in the future. So this requirement, as John was mentioning, constantly traveling and meeting people and going everywhere, all conferences, I think we're going to be more selective as well on that. And fortunately, we are able to develop relationships also in a different way. So I think it's still a big hurricane of events that we will need to digest later on. But so far, we are managing this quite well and really happy with what the team is doing. And of course, when you think about the surge that we are having, we had to do a lot of investments in infrastructure. We had to hire a lot of people to sustain the growth that we had in our systems. Just in March, we had a 4x increase in our volume. So we were already a company reaching 50 million people. So our numbers today are not published, but for sure we're going to surpass that very rapidly because March and April were really outstanding for us. And
congratulations.
We hope this continues. Of course, we have consumer behaviors and organizations' behaviors that will be different in a few months' time, but we're still riding the surge for now.
Congratulations. Yeah, exciting. I mean, certainly that's one of the industries where we've seen a lot of growth. Maybe just as a follow-up question there as well, in terms of products and new learning experiences, immersive learning, online content modules, etc., like new immersive learning experiences, is that also something that you are working on, or you feel that we will see that very soon? And what's your take on that?
So for Udemy, it was all about lifelong learning. So we created this experience a while ago. And of course, we started 10 years ago with consumers, but we evolved into organizations, private sector and public sector. And for those, we want to bring the same personal perspective. So if today you use your mobile phone with a mobile app and you get a movie and you easily have access to that resource, and you can freely go on YouTube and you can search for anything, we want to provide you professional development using the same way our app on your mobile phone or tablet, whatever is comfortable for you. So creating this mindset of lifelong learning is really motivating the learners for a new experience. How do you combine that? And our philosophy is really providing you a collection of material that becomes your own personal encyclopedia. That's how we approached. For the consumer, we have 150,000 courses in 67 languages. So it's a global platform. For the enterprises and governments, we provide a professional product with a subscription. And again, the subscription perspective is your encyclopedia. And you start becoming a self-learner, self-directed learner that organizes yourself. Of course, when you think about that, we provide the top-down experience, so the typical academic approach where the organization will tell you what should be your priorities in terms of learning and maybe assigning a learning track, but also bottom-up, we want the creativity, the innovation. Each of us would learn differently, even if we are in the same department and even if we have the same learning goals, because our behavior would be different. And we always created that experience. And now, it's really comparing what you do in your personal life. The same way you should see professional development as not a burden that someone is calling you and blocking your calendar to go to a physical room and have a lecture with a single instructor. We believe in this kind of choice that you would have in a large collection with the encyclopedia approach.
Okay, okay. Very exciting. Maybe just also a follow-up question, John. You mentioned a point on the startups that obviously big, cost block is real estate. And maybe I'm going to jump over to Gunnar, because I know you guys had a study, you recently published a study revamping organizations for the new reality. And I believe I saw some numbers that organizations could save 10 to 20% moving forward on travel, real estate, desk space in general. Maybe if you could just elaborate there a little bit, and if you feel companies can actually save on these different line items in the future.
Yeah, that's what I touched on already on a very high level before, right? So for us as a business, it really depends on what industry you're in, what business you're driving. But if you have a very travel heavy business, then obviously really challenging yourself, being more selective, as we just discussed. How often do you need to travel? Where do you need to be in person? Where does it make sense? Where can you do it virtually with a broader acceptance of virtual means to have the same conversation, right? So this is certainly a cost down, and depending on the industry, I mean, the cost block of travel can be anywhere between 1 to over 10%. So and if you save X percent of that, that can be significant bottom line saving. When you think about kind of either growing your company with having work from home type of people versus having to expand the real estate, that's another big cost block. And for many services industries, white collar type industries, if you can also be smarter around how you arrange the space so that you maybe have rolling shifts. Not everyone is in the office at all times, or you account for the people that are traveling versus holding a desk for them at all times. So I think there are many models that you can really play through to lower the expense for real estate with the same or even higher number of people, given that you will have more people working from home. So there are quite a number of cost blocks that I think you can influence in a very meaningful way. So to the tune of 10 to 20% of your bottom line, so which is ultimately going to your margin, right? And when you think about where companies are from a revenue perspective, that is certainly something that they can start doing right now, really be cash conscious and contain cost, which will then hopefully also be something that stays with them in the future once they see revenues going up again, which is the case for Lewis and some industries already, but not for all industries. So we're obviously working also with the airline industry or the hotel industry that are very depressed and mostly impacted by this.
Certainly an area where consultants can help, for sure, yeah. Ralf, maybe I just wanted to follow up on your initial statement, so because you're producing software for the supply and logistics industry, and I just wanted to get your take on, some of the changes that are happening in your industry specifically, and also do you feel like, these concepts of just-in-time delivery, is that dead now? Well, globalization, is that going to go, to the back burner again? How do you feel about this? Is every nation now building up again, their own industries and logistics systems? And are we going to put a little bit of a pause button to globalization? What's your take on that?
It's a good point, and it's a huge discussion at the moment as well in Germany, as well in the United States. But I'm pretty sure that this virus or any virus will not stop the globalization. There are some questions coming up. What should be produced domestically in the future? What should be stored in any country? That's important, and that's okay, because we could see that some decisions were made, and then it took some time to get safety clothing or masks or whatever. But when it comes to daily products, to consumer goods, we are living in a free world market, and we still have global trade, global work sharing, production. And we need this competition, you know. Otherwise, we do not have competitive prices in the market. And I guess, especially for consumer goods, it will continue. At the moment, definitely, many of our customers suffer a lot, especially when it comes to textile and apparel. Others are doing pretty well when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to furniture, also toys who are bought very often in e-commerce and online channels. They're doing good. But they're only doing good because of competitive prices. And so I don't think that, that there will be a stop of globalization. Definitely there have to be find some answers, especially for the customers or for the companies who do not have the digitalized world at the moment, who do not work very collaborative with their production facilities, with their factories, vendors, suppliers all over the world. I think they do still have to do some homework. And all in all, I guess we will have a world after COVID-19. For sure, there will be, again, problems coming up. When you see the discussions with President Trump, for example, his task force advisor, Fauci, or the CNN medical advisor, Gupta, there will be coming maybe also a second peak we have to take care of. And there had to be some incentives now also from the government to intensify the consumption again, to bring the people back into the stores, into the shops. Otherwise, we really have an even worse problem than we have at the moment. So there is a discussion of going more into domestic production, but I guess that will be only for pills, for health things, but not for consumer goods.
Interesting. Yeah, so we heard about different industries. You know, obviously travel and probably took one of the strongest hits with you know, their industry. And then other industries, we heard from Luis, Udemy and e-learning. That's an industry apparently to be in right now, which is doing incredibly well. But obviously there's some other industries, some rather odd ones. Sweatpants, for example, is a huge market. Apparently that's working well. With all the Zoomware going on, so that market is working well. But besides the markets, and you know, for me, it looks like Corona doesn't necessarily change the world so much. It just speeds up and compresses certain developments that were already well underway anyway. You just mentioned, Ralf, to a certain extent, you know, trade and, you know, these potentially cold trade war going on between the US and China, potentially that, you know, has now been compressed instead of taking years. You know, now these developments will happen in 15 to 18 months or, you know, Gunnar, I believe you mentioned digitization, right? So the tech disruption of certain industries. So it feels like, you know, what was happening anyway in the next 5 to 10 years now seems to be compressing and seems to be compressed and happening in the next, you know, 12 to 18 months. And just wanted to get your take on it, you know, for your specific industry again, if you think Corona is speeding up developments that were already well underway, and then maybe, you know, looking at the time, if each of one of you could also give, you know, an outlook for your industry and for your business, looking ahead, what's the new normal? I don't know, who wants to start?
I'm happy to start with maybe a perspective from the healthcare industry. So we obviously work across industries, but I focus on the healthcare industry. And somewhat counterintuitively, healthcare is actually not doing so well because many of the, for example, cash cows for the healthcare industry, elective surgery, etc., is down a lot. So people really only go to the clinic, the physician, the hospital if they absolutely have to. Very often COVID related, obviously, these days. Very, very often procedures are delayed or even normal office visits are delayed. So there's also a public health impact potentially from that. But what that means for the healthcare industry overall is that they are suffering in terms of their revenue and margin. So it's not that COVID is flooding the treasure chests of providers, of healthcare providers. That's actually not the case. So they're all struggling. what that led to is, one, that they're trying to get through to their consumer, their customer. So they see the need to be more digital, to be able to interact with people. So you saw some of the Zoom Health, for example, really rallying up a lot of new provider customers. And then I talked with providers who said, what happened during the last 3 months would have taken them 3 years plus before that to get that through their compliance, through everything that providers typically have to do to implement those newer digital solutions. And then some of the really kind of hard lines that providers took a while ago to say, unless it's integrated into my EMR, I don't want any new digital or IT solution. That's not the case right now. So they're really clamoring for those solutions that are just very user-friendly, very easy to implement, cloud-based, which also in healthcare hasn't been a thing because they had kind of on-premise server installations for many of their safety-critical IT pieces. So there's a lot of good change happening, which is accelerated and catalyzed by COVID-19, I think.
Okay. Good to hear. How about the others? Looking ahead, what will be the new normal for your industry?
I can go to education and basically splitting a little bit the perspective. You've seen a lot of discussion about schools around the world closing, and global organizations like the UN concerned about kids that have no choice. So the digital divide coming back again. But there's another divide that is even more concerning, which is a learning divide. People that actually have access to the right methodologies and pedagogy. And I think this is going to be a big discussion that has a lot of dependency on the public sector as well. Universities, I think it's time for disruption. I've been in venture capital before, and one of the things was really looking at how higher ed would evolve. And one concept was breaking up the degree. So kind of a distributed learning environment. I think it's going to be happening. And you don't depend so much on the physical institution to get access to a degree. I think there will be a lot of creativity happening, but of course, not everybody's going to be competitive in that space. If you think about individuals, in the US, you always saw people as freelancers and people really focusing on personal competitiveness, also because of the labor laws. I think in other regions, people now are waking up to this idea of my personal competitiveness. And the other side, which is also beautiful, is people discovering new passions. Just because people have time, they are learning things that they never thought that they would be excited about. So even going beyond that frontier, I think learning is also reaching a new dimension. And for us in the multimedia perspective, you're evolving from buying a book to reading a magazine to actually now going online, fully immersive on a global set of tools that you have. Also in the gaming industry, when you think about simulation and a lot of that, this is the new normal for personal development as well. So I think it's, again, as you mentioned, we are shortening the time that is taking for people to make these major decisions. Maybe a lot of them were already influenced by some of these trends before, but they were not implementing yet. Now they're fast forwarding and they have to take these measures. And in some cases like higher education, I think there's going to be some big disruption there globally.
Great. I want to take a couple of questions from the audience before we close off our morning and afternoon session. One was from Barbara here. She was asking, due to a lot of people working from home now, and has there been, or have you, with your staff, seen increased stress with children being at home and working into late evenings to make up for any distraction during the day? Which is certainly the case. A lot of people that I know had increased stress. I don't know if anybody has any experience there personally or from the job that you want to share.
Yeah, I can maybe comment from kind of the experience. I'm running our Manhattan Beach office, which is about 300 people. And so we had a lot of different life situations, from living alone in an apartment in LA downtown, not having seen anyone for weeks, literally, to 3 kids in kind of a younger school age with 2 working parents, right? So the whole spectrum. And so that obviously causes challenges on both ends. What we've done very actively is we almost over communicated. So there was another question that I saw, what are the 3 most crucial areas, which I'm going to throw in here a little bit. It's really about communicating not just about the changes that are coming down from a legislative perspective or kind of government perspective, but also how are you dealing with that as an employer? So what are you doing to help people? Every team that we run went through a renorming exercise. So we had a work from home task force. So they really kind of pulled all the kind of best practices around what is a good example of working from home in a meaningful way. How can you block times to keep you sane? We offer kind of mindfulness programs to our people through platforms, but also virtual courses that we let them partake in, fitness as well. So we try to kind of encourage people to mix up their day a little bit. And also really very openly talk about empathy, that people just understand better that those different life situations exist, so that the renorming helps them to find a new rhythm in the very changed environment for them, not having daycare for their children, etc., or the children don't go to school, homeschooling while somebody else is working. So I think it really depends on the interaction between the people in a company, and then also we're working a lot with our clients, with our customers as well. So we're even expanding that and extending that to say, okay, let's understand how we work together so that we don't break one link in the chain, basically.
Okay. We have a couple of minutes left. Anybody else wants to take this question here from Lex? What are the 3 most crucial areas within an organization that need to be addressed to stay competitive during and after COVID? Anybody interested in taking this? Ralf, Louis?
Yeah, I only can say that the governments in the countries really have to find some incentives to start the consumption again. When you see the GDP in Germany, 50% is consumption, maybe even more in the United States, and we really have to see that people again want to spend money, want to go into the stores, want to go into the shops, because there are many small brands and small owners with a couple of employees who suffer a lot at the moment, and especially those we really need to help. And also when it comes to the tourism, or when we see the problems with the airlines, we are in a globalized world, and we definitely have to find answers for this, because when we continue the consumption, we will also help the developing countries who suffer a lot. And when you see production, for example, in Bangladesh, there had been a cancellation and postponement of 920 million garments only in a couple of weeks, and a million of people had been unemployed only in April. And the same situation in Cambodia or India. So we in the industrial world, we really have to find answers on the social responsibility also, that we do not leave these guys alone, that we do not only see our advantages and our benefits to go on with the industry, but we also have to see what's going on in other countries, especially in Africa and Asia.
I agree. It's actually a great topic for a future panel, actually, which I think we should really look into. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. We're out of time. I want to thank everybody again. It looks like virtual is the new reality, and I wanted to thank GABA again and NRW.Invest for organizing and co-sponsoring this event. And it was great, to talk to you this morning and this evening, and great zoning in on this complex situation. So thanks again, everybody. And stay healthy. Talk soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Kai.
Thank you.
Stay healthy.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.